Hey everybody, this is the Coach U podcast and I'm your host, Coach U. This podcast is about being curious, learning from others, and using what we've learned to evolve every single day. Hey everyone, thanks for joining the Coach U podcast today. Today's conversation is with Alan Dean, who is the head performance coach for Great Britain Baseball, and he's been in the game for over 30 years. You can imagine he has learned a lot over the years as technology has changed the way that we train. Alan talks about the art of coaching and how to speak athlete and how to get athletes to buy in because that is so crucial. He also touches on youth sports and how to train when you're younger and why it's important to get kids prepped for the rest of their lives with training. And lastly, we talk about cricket, baseball, and golf and how they all correlate. Who'd have thought? If you enjoy this conversation, please make sure to subscribe, share it with someone else who you think would find this information valuable. So without further ado, enjoy this conversation with Alan Dean. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Coach U podcast. I'm your host, Coach U. Today, we're being joined by Alan Dean. Hi, Alan. How you doing today?
I'm great. How are you, Coach?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Could you just give your quick intro of who you are and what you do?
I'm a strength and conditioning coach, sports rehab guy based in Horsham, West Sussex in England. So I'm about an hour south of London for those people that have been to London and understand that part of the world. I've been involved in coaching. I'm your classic athlete gets injured, ends up working in sport as a result because he's unfulfilled as an athlete. And I've been doing so for coming up for best part of 3 decades now.
Very nice. Very nice. What has been the main sport that you played and what is the main sport that you train now?
Track and field is where I come from. I was a 400-meter runner. That's where the bad things happened. And now I tend to work mainly in baseball and softball, but I have a background in rotational strength sports. Track and field, golf, cricket, baseball, softball.
We spoke a few weeks ago and we had a great conversation. We met through one of my athletes or one of our shared athletes.
Yeah.
And he introduced me to you and we got to talking and I had so many questions and I still have a lot more. So let's dive in. First, we're going to start with what we call the impact deck and I'm going to show it to you. So The impact deck, the cards are actions, some are reflections and some are affirmations. So depends on the card. So we're going to go here with an affirmation. How about this? As a coach, from a coach's perspective, from a life perspective, every day I will become more, fill in the blank. Every day I will become more.
I'll become more reflective. And I think that for me, taking on board what's previously happened, how I've interacted with people, and how I plan my day is not based off of just what would I like to do today. I think the more I go through this process of learning how to be a coach and how to work with people, the more I reflect back on what I've done previously and how can I make that better. How do I make an athlete's experience better?
I love that. So on that, what have you found over the years in coaching to make an athlete's experience better?
First, not to treat them like an athlete. I think it's treat them as a human being. So get to understand them, get to know what's going on in their life. So if I'm working in person with somebody and they're rocking up, I'm kind of all about kind of what's the demeanor like, how they're presenting themselves, what the energy level's like. Because when you start to build up the relationships with them, as you do, whether it's a kind of one-to-one or whether it's a small group or even large group, you pick up the vibes as kind of how they're doing and getting to understand what's going on in people's lives, which is probably 75 to 80% of the rest of their day. That impacts on their experience as an athlete, impacts on their ability to perform. And I think if I get the opportunity to do that and can start to build relationships with players, then we'll do so.
What is the biggest difference that you've seen in players that you've connected with, that you've been able to treat them not like an athlete, get to know them, get to know their personal lives, versus athletes maybe you haven't been able to connect with so much, or maybe in the past that wasn't a thing you did so much?
I think it's a combination of the two there that you've just mentioned. It was probably something I didn't do as much. I'm probably more focused on them as their role, focus on the sport, for want of a better term. Yeah, I had a couple of athletes where things weren't going well for them, and things kept going wrong. And you look at the training. Okay, well, the training's going well, but they're just there's a piece of the jigsaw that's not fitting. And and it was really by chance having a conversation with somebody. Said, yeah, do you want to let's just sit down and have a coffee. What's going on? Tell me what's going on in your world. And then just stuff starts opening up. And you change things because and I think we talked about this before when we talked about energy buckets. If they're autonomous nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system and sympathetic nervous system are battling each other, that's drawing energy away from their ability to do what they want to do with regards to the sport. And for me, it was not a light bulb moment. It wasn't one of those big kind of gestalt moments. It was a case of, okay, I really need to spend more time getting to know people. And getting to know them and understand them and letting them know that as a coach, you care about them as a human being first rather than an athlete. You get more buy-in. You get more out of them in general. It's obviously not going to be the case with absolutely everybody because some people don't necessarily get that level of relationship with. But I think it's important to be open to it. That would be the kind of the way I would look at it.
Yeah, it seems like we can get really lost as coaches and athletes. And even when you're there, you show up and you have your athletes there, the coach is there, you guys are there to do business, right? That's kind of what the idea is, right? And I think it's easy to get lost with that human connection element. And, personally speaking, I've definitely seen the growth of relationships and the buy-in when you do have more of a connection. It's like, times are changing in that way. So over the years, what have you seen in terms of your own evolution? What have you seen in terms of coaching evolution during your time as a strength conditioning coach?
It's a great question, but it's such a wide question because there's so many things have changed. I mean, this in particular, the ability to speak on a video from one part of the planet to the other, like you're sitting in front of somebody at a table.
Cool.
The way the speed of interaction that this is working, you might as well be sitting at the other side of my table here. I think technology has increased things. I think it's maybe overcomplicated things, and I think we do get hit by analysis paralysis. That can be a big factor. I think niching down on what we do as coaches. I think there's gone a phase where we've gone through this funnel of niche, and then I think it's going to start to open up again with kind of the phrase. Now I heard a few months ago the generalist specialist, which seems like an oxymoron.
Yeah.
But it's not because of the very things we've just talked about better understanding of recovery. Now, better opportunity to learn and train from great coaches. I think those aspects, where the world's getting smaller, our opportunities get bigger, but they become more complicated. So you have to be quite careful about sifting through what you think is important, what works with your values and your philosophy, and taking on board how you as an individual can help somebody move forward. And that's, for me, that's why I do it. My role is to help people. And it might be to help them achieve something in the gym, because that is required for their position, for the sport, for their performance. Or it might be, I can connect you with somebody else who's going to help you better than I can, because we build our networks. And this is where technology massively helps us.
Absolutely. It's not a competition in the coaching world. Not that I see. It seems like a very communal world, and I've been in it for, close to a decade now, and seeing the openness and the help that other coaches want to give to other coaches, I think is amazing. Just even having conversations like this. And I don't think there really is an excuse to not be educated anymore, especially in the training world. And not to say that trainers and coaches need to know every single thing about every single, part of training or anatomy or physiology. But I do think it is really important that we have a grasp on the basics.
Yeah.
And it's become easier to get those basics. You can find so many courses online now. You can go to YouTube and watch videos all day from professionals, and you're learning. That is free education. And I think it's amazing. So I'm glad you've seen that change too. From a traditional strength and conditioning standpoint, let's just say from an exercise approach and how we approach training, what have you seen change the most?
I think we've gone away from the policy where max strength is all.
Yeah.
That you perform better. Or what you know, the classic bro statement: what do you bench? What do you squat? What do you deadlift? Yeah, just because your numbers are higher than my numbers, even though they're relatively not, shouldn't be the same anyway. I think when we go that and we start to understand the implications of the force velocity curve, and we can actually make use of, again, technology, the output that we were talking about, the output system that we both use, going away from like things like GymAware, where it was mainly big organizations or educational institutions that had access to that. As technology becomes a little bit more democratic because technology is improving and advancing, and it means that solo coaches like ourselves are in a position to be able to afford things like that. It changes things. But I think that the big thing is to move away from just how heavy can you go to what do I need and how does this then impact on my sport.
Movement efficiency and movement quality seem to be more important, especially at the beginning. And you got young guys who come in, 13, 14, 15. Personally, I think that they should be focused on just straight up movement. Like, how well can you squat? How well can you deadlift? How well can you press? How well can you pull? All the basics, and lunge and core. Like, those are, you do the basics, you're going to get better. And I'm glad you touched on the movements. I have to point out GymAware and also Output Sports, two fantastic companies that have put out some technology that if you're a coach, you want something to help you really in real time see what the athlete's energy levels are, or maybe their strength that day, or maybe what output they can, no pun intended, but what output can they give that day, I think is very important, and it helps a lot as a coach. So I'm glad you're able to use those things, and I'm very fortunate to be using those things as well because my athletes love it and they love the real-time numbers. What would you say about movement quality versus movement or max movement or max strength?
Like you alluded to a few minutes ago, when you're looking at young guys who are in the early stages of the strength development and their body's changing, they're both from a height and growth perspective, hormonally they're changing massively. My key thing is, how efficient can you move? And we use a term, you earn the right. You earn the right to put a barbell on your back. You earn the right to lift a barbell from the floor. If you don't have the movement proficiencies to be able to do that, then you shouldn't be doing it. And this is not my. This is gained from coaches like Dan Baker at Australian SCA, where they look at not just long-term athlete development and band them by age, where they're looking at, well, what's their development? Where are they biologically as opposed to just chronologically? Does that match up with where they are and the ability to perform fundamental movement screens? And we'll test them. And if they don't fulfill the requirement to be able to kind of control their body, then we will delay them moving on to the next stage, which will be starting to lift iron and move barbells around. You earn the right to do stuff. If you can't do it, you're not moving on. And with the long-term athlete development system that we have in place in the UK, US, Australia, I think sometimes we miss that. And I know of sports where age and biological maturity impacts the abilities of some people to play. And for instance, in the UK, we have biobanding. So if you've got a relatively young biological age 15-year-old, and they'll move down to the age group that they need to be working with. Equally so, if you've got a 6'4", 220-pound 13-year-old, and they have the ability to control their body, they might go up 6 months or 1 year group to be able to then kind of max out. But obviously, that's purely in a technical sport perspective. But I'm looking at it from the perspective, well, what can this person do? Are they ready to move on to the next stage? Is it just physically that they're ready, or are they mentally not ready as well? So we'll kind of test the waters and see where they're at. Because sometimes they like staying with their friends, and if it means that they're moving on, they're leaving their friends behind. We're talking about looking after people holistically. Well, let's keep him with his friends for the extra 6 months and encourage you, help them, encourage them to move forward so they can continue catching up with them. There's a lot to it, and sometimes
Yeah.
it can seem kind of very this side or this side, and it's not. There's so many shades in between.
Yeah, I see that too. Like the positive side of keeping, let's say that example of the 240, 6'3" kid who maybe could go up to the next group, but keeping them with their friends, keeping them with that energy that makes them feel good. And they might even be the big dog in the group at that point, which makes them feel like a leader. You could be instilling leadership at that
Yeah,
point. I do think that it does help looking into more than just numbers, and just you have to take into the whole account, like you said, the holistic approach. And I love that you instill that in your system. We talked about multi-sport athletes
yeah.
being very like it's an important thing for kids to play multiple sports. I always encourage my athletes to play multiple sports, whether it's in an actual league or just recreationally. You're going to pick up things when you play different kinds of sports. So what are the benefits of playing multiple sports?
For me, I think it allows them to develop two key things. First thing is their ability to work in multiple planes. So they're not just stuck in the sagittal plane. We're working in the frontal plane, we're working transverse plane. They're learning how to control their body through multiple areas of time and space. Yeah, I don't. I would have a hard time having that conversation with a coach who didn't think that was a bonus. I don't see any downside to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unless you're doing something that just puts yourself at risk.
I can understand if you're a multi-million-dollar contract playing basketball when you're a baseball player. I understand
Yeah,
at that level, like you have to protect your assets. But the younger
yeah.
kids can afford that. And also they're growing, and that's when they're going to develop the most coordination.
The other side of that coin is I think it's very good for them to help develop from a conditioning side of things. Is
Mm.
when you
Hmm.
focus on a sport like baseball or basketball, you may not be in a position to actually develop the full range of conditioning that you need to, and at the same time you're not developing those recovery batteries that we talked about.
Yeah.
You're not giving yourself the opportunity for the parasympathetic and the sympathetic system to work in tandem together to allow
Yeah.
you to recover. So you're not constantly stressed, you're not constantly raising cortisol. And if you're playing a pickup game at basketball, you know, yeah, physically you're working, but it's fun, and fun helps you recover, and it helps you
Yeah.
sleep at night. And what are the things we're constantly saying that players: get your sleep, get your food, get your movement, get everything else sorted before you worry about anything else. Get the foundations in place.
Yeah. The
Yeah,
foundations are so long. They get forgotten because it's not the glamorous, it's not the next big thing.
no. And then the other side, we've talked kind of two sides, but I suppose down the middle, there's that social context as well, and it's very
Mm-hmm.
important, especially for good athletes who, parents, God love them. I'm a parent myself. I've got two active boys. Yeah, it's very easy as a parent to kind of be thinking long term. Oh, we should be doing this. We should be doing that. But the kids need some fun as well. They need a bit of downtime. It can't always be the onward and upward trajectory.
One of the things that you love adding in for fun for the kids when you're working with them.
Well, particularly warm up games. We'll kind of spend the first kind of 5 to 10 minutes, if we have that luxury of 5 to 10 minutes, but we'll say the first 3 to 5 minutes, just doing some games. It might be kind of chase the flag. It might be a version of football. It might be, we use balloons. We just something that's a bit of fun, but we get their bodies moving, and
Yeah.
we get some activation going, and we get the heart rate up a little bit, and they're enjoying it. And more importantly, we can get some smiles as well.
Yeah. No, it's important. You want to have the mood, the energy, all that matters when you're in a training
Yeah,
environment.
yeah,
And if you're starting it off with some smiles and some laughs, and that brings the energy into the weight room or wherever you're doing that day on the field for sprints. That's great. Yeah.
absolutely.
Have to incorporate some fun. You mentioned this earlier about training age and competency in the weight room. How do you deal with it when you have a kid or an athlete who wants to do that next level. They don't really want to buy into staying here at this level that they need to work on. How do you work around that? How do you work with that?
I think one of the first things is to make sure I've got buy-in from the parents. So if I believe that this will be something that's going to rear its head, and
Mm-hmm.
typically it does with the younger, smaller biological age, and their friends are grown, but they're not quite at that stage of their development. It's conversation with the parents. So look, this is where things are heading. I want to keep them in the group, but we're going to have to modify a few things. I think it's always important to you've always got a range of things that are going on within a session. So, say for instance, we've got a squat process going on. It doesn't necessarily mean everybody should be working on the same weight, but the same rep range, to the same depth. We can modify and regress. So, I can manipulate the session to allow the young person, the young athlete, to be doing the same work as everybody else, but maybe we pair them up to be able to help coach each other.
Mm-hmm.
And we adjust the weights relative to what their need is. So if it's somebody who needs to do goblet squat, then it will become a goblet squat for that group, so you're not singling somebody out. Then we rotate those other people out of that group. We bring other people into the... So you're moving the young person around, but you're consciously moving them around and away from the areas that's going to maybe cause them problems because they're not ready for it. That makes sense. So it's not just going, well, today's squat day, there's the barbell, let's load it up, group 1, group 2, group 3. It's, okay, we've got squat patterning that we're going to do. These are the guys that I want to do X. These are the guys I want to do Y. These are the guys I want to do Z.
Yeah. And it makes it simple for them to follow.
Yeah.
And they're still part of the group. They're not getting told that they can't do something.
No.
But it is, the modifications are key. We paint this picture of you should be able to squat, you should be able to deadlift, you should be able to bench press. But we don't know a person's anatomy, right? These are just baselines that we kind of have to mold them into what fits their baseline, I guess, if you will.
Yeah. I'm going to chuck this term out there. I could get shot down for it. Relatively straightforward human movement pattern as a squat. We can find something in everybody to be better at. I'll make use of the hip halos and bringing those out and using those bands, making sure that everybody's in the position where they understand that they're still developing, and what they're developing is their relative development. Just their relative development is something that will be specific to them, be specific to the group, because that's what they're working on as a whole. So we're working on our squat patterns, but utilizing equipment to be able to say, okay, well, your correctors for this is X, Y, and Z. We're going to be then moving that on to be able to do it. So we're going to go heavy goblet squat. We may go to a front rack kettlebell with the dumbbell at the side, and we may be doing some terra squats just to mix it. And nobody else does it, just apart from and these are hard. So somebody else may be doing a box squat because that's where they're up in the development.
Right.
So I think it's important to understand where they are in the continuum of the group's development, but also relative to their own development, and move it around sufficiently enough that you're covering all those bases, but not to the exclusion of the one kid who's on his own doing goblet squats in the corner, while 6 of his mates they're all off on 2 racks or 2 platforms working in rotations to do their work. Now that wouldn't be right, and that definitely something that I wouldn't be doing. It's got to be it's got to be inclusive.
Yeah, no, I like that. You have to keep everyone together, and that's I just even thinking about what you were talking about there with just like the different variations of the same movement, but making sure it's adaptable to that person, giving the feedback, and then putting them in the appropriate categories. It's so important. We talked about having a diverse toolbox and not just having being a kettlebell person or a
Yeah.
barbell person only, or a CrossFit person, or because I think that every category that you bring up in training and fitness and health, there's going to be some benefit or something we can utilize to help our athletes. And I think as a coach, it's really important to have that diverse toolbox as opposed to like one way of thinking, right? We have to be open-minded. And so on to that point of, being able to pull multiple tools out of your toolbox, how does that help you as a coach be able to help your athletes more?
I think it's vital. I think it's one of those things as a coach that you develop your understanding of what works. And yeah, just because a barbell might not be right for that person, a kettlebell maybe. What are we looking at? What are we trying to achieve with the exercise?
Mm.
Is it to use a piece of equipment, or is it to develop better a movement pattern that we want to become stronger and more efficient? There's multiple ways, and I think we used a kitchen analogy, if I remember correctly, where we talked
Yeah.
about not everybody needs to be a short order cook. It's not a case of, well, we've got a limited menu, so everybody's on either burgers today or it's lasagna today. It's not. We
Yeah.
want to be the Michelin star chef who has got the skill set that you can actually draw on all the ingredients and all the skills that they have in order to create the best dish in the world for that person, and utilizing the skill set and utilizing the ingredients, because it's not just the piece of equipment, it's what you do with it. And that's
Right.
where things like output can be extremely useful, because we can gamify it. We can
Yep.
a simple thing as a med ball rotational throw to a wall. We started to introduce using output on the wrist. I picked this up from a very good fast bowling cricket coach in the UK called Stephen Jones, and he's been utilising it. He's been utilising output for throwing. So even something as relatively light as a light plyo ball, you can use it in output to see what forces, what speeds are being generated. It
Yeah.
doesn't really matter what's in their hand, as long as it's appropriate for them. So if we've got, say, a 4-pound med ball, and we want them to work on generating speed. So say we're using it from a batting perspective, and we're trying to get the engine going on the back leg and the brake going on the front leg, and we use it against the wall. Yeah, it's coming off the wall fast, but what if we've got a measure here on the phone which is going, well, that was 7.2 miles per hour, and then the next kid goes 8.2. When the next one goes 8.9, suddenly you've got them in rotation going, okay, there's a leaderboard here. And I know a lot
Yeah.
of apps these days use leaderboards, particularly for remote coaching. And it's a really useful tool. Any way we can gamify it, it gets buy-in.
We have a plan as a coach. We have a program that we put together. We have the foundation, but I don't know that I've ever completed an exact program with
Mm.
a group of athletes or even an athlete or a personal training client. Most of the time, there's something you have to change. How do you deal with changes in the moment, and why is it crucial to be able to navigate and to change on the fly?
I think that's where the art of coaching comes in. I
Yeah.
think that's wheel hours at the wheel. You can become instinct is probably not the right word. Educated enough to start to see
Mm.
what's going on. It's like when you learn to drive. When you first passed your test, you're for want of a better term, a rabbit in the headlights. You're constantly looking at and being very, very. But when you've driven for a number of years, and you're driving down the motorway, the freeway, you get a sense of, I'm just going to hold back here, but you've no reason
Mm.
to know why, and then something happens, or somebody's going to walk out in front of you.
Yep.
We get it all the time, and maybe it's a sense that we've lost the ability to use, but these things happen, and I think with coaching, for me, the art of coaching is understand who you're working with. So this case all the way back to the beginning of the humanist approach, the holistic approach of understand who you're working with. To then at that point go, okay, let's just make a slight change here. We're just going to change the program a little bit today, because I want to see where you're at with this. And it doesn't always have to be sold as a negative. Can be sold as a positive. That we're just going to change. We're going to go a little bit lighter. Let's see what your speed's like today. And there's 1,001 plus ways of working out why you would do something. It's not about that session. It's not about the outcome of that particular movement. I don't care if it's 100 pounds down on the previous one. If the movement's better and the quality's better and the recovery's going to be better for 2 days' time, I'd rather have that and know that in the consistency of taking that approach in 6 weeks, 12 weeks, 2 years' time, we're developing that athlete at the pace and the approach that's suitable for them. Numbers on a sheet of paper or on an app or on my iPad, to be honest, they're just a guide and a start point. How we move it forward is all relative to what we're seeing and how we're interpreting it. And that, I think, is what coaching is about. It's the art of coaching.
I love that. And you did talk about the Michelin star as a coach. And so I kind of want to touch on that again. So can you give us that Michelin star as a coach analogy?
Well, I think just as we said with regards to kind of your experience, one of my cousins is a Michelin star chef. And
I hope he feeds you or she feeds you well.
No, he does. Can you not tell? And he's been around the world coaching, being a chef, executive chef, and he's coached at some. He's chefed at some fairly important places, and has got a great track record. And we talk about the skill sets that you have to develop in order to produce something at that level of fine cuisine. And often it's the ability to know when to stop to do something. So when you say you're cooking a very fine piece of fish, to know the point at which, with the timing of everything else that's going on, the point at which you stop cooking, so by the time you've plated it and put it in front of the customer, you know that fish is at its best condition.
That's pretty.
Because it's still cooking on its way.
Super challenging. Yeah.
It's still when it's plated and it's going from the kitchen, it's going out to the restaurant. That fish is still cooking. It's like if people are good with good barbecue guys, they know when they're probing temperature and they want that brisket at a certain temperature, or they want that filet mignon at a certain temperature. They know they're bringing it out way before it's hit the temperature that they actually want to eat it at, because they know the processes are still going. Okay, so when we talk about using the Michelin star approach, it's having the techniques, the skills, the foresight, and the ingredients to be able to put the best dish in front of people. We're cooking it. We're effectively cooking the athlete's ability to perform at a given point in time. We're not that, but as SNC, we're only a small part of the ingredients.
Right.
What we allow the other ingredients to work effectively, so that the technical coaches can work on what they need to. If it's because they need to be able to hold a position for longer, if they need to have that ability to hinge effectively on the back leg when they're batted, and then have the control to break and utilize that kinetic chain up the body to be able to get the maximum force and speed out of that bat, out of the hands, then we're doing our job. We're providing the ingredients to allow the technical coaches for them to be their chef. So they've got their own restaurant. We're in a different restaurant. We're not competing with one another, but we're working with one another to produce the best ingredients that we can to put the dish together.
I like that analogy a lot. And when you think about it, it does take care, it does take time, it does take the knowledge, and intuition, experience, right? Those things happen, over time. And like you said, the more you drive or the more you cook or the more you coach, you're going to get better. I think a lot of times it's being present and being able to see what's in front of you and actually take in what's going on, who the person is, what the objective is. So if I were to take that analogy a little further and say, okay, if I'm a chef, I have probably other things cooking at the same time. I
Yeah.
have certain ingredients that have to go in at a certain time. I have to let
Yeah.
this sit for a certain amount of minutes. It's the same concept. Like, it can get overwhelming, right? There's so many things to think about. And same thing with training. There's so many tools we can use. There's so many different methods we can use, or, styles of training we can implement. And it can be complicated. How do you make it easier to break down?
There's often times I can't explain why I would do something. There's an outcome. I know what the outcome I want to happen. But the outcome may not happen in that session. The outcome may be 2 sessions down the road. Because at that point in time, it wouldn't be right to try and push. So this is where we're getting to the point where we're taking performance over consistency. And we're not looking at it from a development. If again, I'm not sponsored by Outlook, by the way, but any VBT type system where we're auto-regulating, and we can now, you don't have to have a system. We could use RPE. Like, most athletes haven't a clue what RPE is because they can't comprehend the difference between a 6 and a 7, or a 7 and an 8.
It's hard to not go 100%, especially as an athlete. You think that's what you're supposed to be doing 24/7.
Yeah, but if we're going to auto-regulate, and we've got the tools in front of us to be able to do that, whether it's our own vision or whether it's we've got technology to assist in that. There are times where you go, okay, well, the ingredients aren't good enough today. We can't make that dish today. We're going to have to wait until we get a better supply in maybe 2 days' time. So being patient, but also communicating well. And I think communication, particularly words that we use to athletes, and you mentioned right at the beginning what the big changes that I've seen in myself and my approach to coaching. I think one of the biggest changes I've had is that I'm very conservative with my words. You remember a time when a coach shouted at you or said something to you or belittled you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Do you remember the times when coaches said good stuff to you?
Only the bigger moments, I think.
What about day-to-day moments?
I wouldn't say I necessarily remember a specific moment, but the coaches that were supportive and positive and pushed you, and you knew that they wanted the best for you.
There's ways of feeding back both things that you would like to see improve and things that are good. I'm just very conscious these days that I want to be as positive with them as I can be to help them achieve what they're good. Because I think over the last 5 years, there's been so much that's going on in the world, and particularly kind of when we're dealing with young athletes. I'm noticing it. And I know I've talked to many coaches who work with similar sort of age groups, but the levels of social anxiety and personal anxiety that young people have is through the roof compared to maybe 10 years ago. And it's my role to help them, if I can, to navigate the little bit of their journey that I can have impact on. So for me to be mindful of how I speak to them, to be mindful of what I'm saying and how I'm saying it in order to get the best out of them is, and that again, you got to you go back to understanding the athlete. Some people, they need some support and encouragement, and they need that proverbial arm around the shoulder. You're doing fine. It's not a problem. This is just where we're at. Or, come on, where are you today? What's going on? Is there something distracting you? Because this isn't what we did a couple of weeks ago. And there's ways of doing it without being the typical, the D1 college S&C coach from 25 years ago who now can't talk because his voice has gone completely. The world of coaching has changed, and the way in which we interact with young people has changed, and we have to be very mindful of that.
When you were talking about just the anxieties and the social anxieties that kids struggle with. So, speaking to athletes, what are the things that you always rely on when it comes to speaking athlete, when it comes to their psyches, when it comes to helping them maybe overcome a depressive moment, maybe overcoming a bad, state of mind?
Again, I think it's it sounds like I'm beating the same drum here. I think it's getting to understand them as people. Because some people will be very, outward in how they appear. They're very gregarious. Some may be a lot quieter, but that's fine. That's how they demonstrate their confidence in their ability in their sport, or their ability to maybe help with technology. I mean, that's half the problem I get is I'm heading towards my 60s and I can barely operate a key, getting a lock in a lock in the front door. So, if they're in a position where Jimmy, I need some help here. Can you come and help the old guy, because I don't know what to do. I do know what I need to do with it, but I want to engage them.
Yeah.
And then it's just this little fist bump at the end. Thanks for that, man. I really appreciate it. I don't know what I'd do without you. You're my IT guy, and it's just starting to understand what makes them tick. And if it can be something, just be something, a little thing like a little fist bump, just like, cheers, man, appreciate it. Go and kill that med ball right now. It's engaging. It's engaging with them. I do have a no phone rule. The only person that can have a phone is me. And the only reason I've got that phone is if I need to make an emergency call, or I'm using an app for. But we don't have phones. There's a box.
I like that.
There's a box. The phones go in the box. If you need to be on your phone, then you don't need to be here.
Right. I like that. I'm going to start using that line a lot, actually.
Simple as. It's you can't be in two places.
Yeah.
Can't be in two places at once. Yeah. Because if you are trying to be in two places at once, then you become a danger to yourself and you become a danger to other people.
Yep. And you're also not getting your full self out of that.
No.
And that's, you're distracted. You're in another place. You're not presently here.
And we can't have it. I mean, you can't have phones in the dugouts. The competition levels that some of our players get to play at, phones are not allowed in the dugouts. It's very, very well policed, and it's just not something you can do. Get used to not having it. There's going to be periods in your life when you grow up and you move on to college or the world of work where your phone's not going to be allowed to be used, or not in the way that you want to use it. So we have to learn these kind of social norms that they're constantly evolving. One of the things that I like to instill is, if we've got a guest coach or we've got somebody new, my expectation is that those athletes will go up and introduce themselves and offer their hand and look the person in the eye. Mm-hmm. It's hugely important, because it's not about what they do in that moment. It's a life skill.
100%.
And I'm very fortunate, because baseball and softball in particular, and please tell me if this is different in across the pond, but we still here are very, very cognizant about utilizing baseball to develop life skills. And we will make sure that whether it's a new player, that the other players are going to introduce themselves. If it's a new coach, they're going to, but at the end of the session, everybody comes up and thanks everybody else for their time and their effort.
I love the fact that athletes don't just leave. And when they do try to sneak out, I call them out, not in an embarrassing way, but like, get over here. Are you kidding me? Like, you're not just going to leave this weight room without saying bye, and a fist bump, like having those interactions with coaches and other people. And, there's so many life lessons in sports.
I think the fact, if you've got to explain it constantly, and we try not to explain it at all, but when it comes to other social contexts and they're meeting somebody for the first time, it may be a family friend, it may be their first ever interview, and they walk through the door and they stride up, put their hand out, look the person in the eye. 95% of other people going for that role at that age will not do that. that sets you apart straight away as somebody. Oh, who have we got here?
Where do you think the apprehensiveness comes from?
Away from doing that, or
Yeah,
just
to not
just
look,
in
to
general,
not actually make eye contact, to not, go up and do something like that.
because they don't need to. They don't need to make eye contact because they don't need to talk to people because they can ping them a message.
Yeah.
I mean, how many families and friends that the teenagers and the mom and dad talk through WhatsApp?
Yep.
Yeah, dinner's ready, and then that's just a small little encapsulation of it, but it goes all the
Right.
way through different aspects of society.
When it comes to energy buckets, because we talked about that last time, not
Yeah.
just the energy buckets, but there's so many buckets to fill, I think, within training. I do think the mental side is one of them. Can you explain to me how you view the energy buckets when it comes to training, maybe even life? How do you view it?
I try and explain to the athletes and equally the parents that we've only got so much energy that we can generate and use. We use the analogy of, I think there was a professor who used, it was like a pint glass, and he put some couple of big rocks in, then he put some smaller rocks in, and then he put even some gravel in, and then he filled the rest of it up with sand. So it basically was absolutely packed.
Yep.
So I try and use the analogy with water because it's easier to use. And okay, well, you've got a third of your bucket is probably going to be sleep because that's what you need in order to recover and develop as a human being. We all need it, and as you get older, you tend to get less of it.
Yep.
Doesn't mean you don't need it, but you tend to get less of it for a variety of reasons. Then you've got all the things that you need to do during the day, what your body needs to do during the day. It's to be able to breathe and function and perform. Yeah. Then you've got schoolwork or your job. That takes up a large amount of energy. It may take up physical energy. It may take up emotional and mental energy. It may take up a combination of the two. Then you've got relationships with family, friends, social, all that side of things. Your sport, that all takes energy. So by the time you get to it, you probably only got about 5 or 10% energy left to train effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And if you aren't ensuring that you're looking after the rest of that energy bucket and keeping a good lid on it and making sure there aren't holes appearing in the sides or where you're not getting the sleep, or you've got toxic relationships that are causing you problems. And sometimes you can't always help that, but you can get help to deal with it. Or you're not eating appropriately, so you're not looking after your body to be able to get the sleep, to be able to recover effectively, to be able to work effectively. So you're not allowing your body to make sure that energy bucket is as full up as you can get it, but to leave yourself enough room so that you can train effectively. So when it comes to the next day or the next week, that the bucket isn't draining and it's not getting more holes because you're overdoing it. That's how I use it.
It's really tough with kids too, and younger athletes. They have schoolwork, they have multiple sports. How can I set myself up to be at the best state I can daily? You talked about recovery and it being something that isn't going to be at its peak if we're not giving ourselves that time to really make that a priority. And when our nutrition is poor, we're not getting enough sleep, you as an athlete are setting yourself up to be injured. It's not a guarantee. I'm a percentage guy. I'm a numbers guy. I'm now at this point putting my percentages a lot higher to be injured and susceptible to injury when I'm not taking care of the energy, or making sure my energy bucket is not overloaded. You've been doing this for how many years? You said 30 years?
Yeah.
Plus?
Yeah.
Right. So it's experience, it's knowledge, it's understanding. It's like you've been there, you understand the flow. And I think trying to teach the flow of, how to undulate, go up and down, to be able to get back after you fishtail, because it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Life's going to throw you things. You're going to have toxic people in your life. You're going to have stressful moments. You're going to have sad moments. You're going to have super happy moments. All of these things are part of that energy bucket. We need to make sure our energy buckets are at a good level.
And I think, helping educate the parents to understand it as well. I'm a parent. I'm always doing this. Dad taxi time. You're always constantly looking at, well, what's the return on my time investment here? Because parents do. It's a natural thing to do. And what's their measure? Well, their measure is performance. It's the only measure they really have.
Yep.
And if we're in a position where we're draining more energy from the bucket because we're putting pressure on the kid, well, you're doing this training, you're doing this extra work, but your performance is going backwards a little bit. That's because our job as coaches, whether it's the S&C side of things or whether it's the technical coaches, we've not educated the parents enough to know things are not linear. They will not go from A to B in a straight line. You're going to go up and down because that's what nature does. And we're just fulfilling the opportunity. So if you're going to put stress, all you're doing, you're putting stress on your young athlete, you're just draining more energy out of that athlete's bucket.
Yep.
And I try where it's not always successful because you always get interesting people come through your facility, and it can make life colourful. Let's put it that way. But there are times where you just got to kind of let go, give them a break.
Yeah.
I know that's hard for you. That's hard for them to hear because ultimately they're paying. But yeah, you're paying for experience and advice to be able to get this young person to where they want to be. And I'm helping, and you're helping because you're paying and you're doing all the stuff at home. But understand that putting pressure on has a consequence.
It matters. It matters a lot.
Massively.
And I think that's what's tough as a strength coach or a leader, a teacher, anything. That's why I think it's important to make that part of the day fun, enjoyable, something that they love, that they can connect to. We try to make that their, the best, that hour, that 60 minutes, that 45 minutes, whatever the case is, just trying to get them to enjoy it and smile. Like you said earlier, I think I've gotten way away from overcomplicating things and just gotten to the point of what's in front of me right now. How are you feeling? What's the best I can get out of you right this minute?
Yeah.
Find your 100 and then bring it to 80 and just stay there. Just stay around there because you're probably going to do really well at that point. If you're always revving at 100, you're going to redline your engine.
Yeah, we call it redlining. You can't be at the red line all the time because that's going to get you in the physical therapist room.
Yeah.
You may not even realize that the puzzle piece is missing.
I want to shift it a little bit because I would be crazy if I didn't talk about rotational sports and rotational physiology and training a little bit. How long have you been in the baseball world now?
So I'll be around about 2004, 2005.
And then before, and have you worked with cricket as well?
I worked with cricket. I worked in professional soccer here in the UK. I worked in professional golf.
How many correlations are there between golf and baseball and cricket?
All three. Yeah, from a throwing perspective with baseball and cricket, that's slightly different because with cricket,
I want to hear about that.
Well, with cricket, you bowl with a straight arm, and you can bowl. It's not as CNS fatiguing because you've got to run up. I mean, it's still fatiguing. Don't get me wrong. I've hung out to dry if I said fast bowling wasn't. But there are different forms of bowling. But with fast bowling in particular, it's a slightly different beast because you have to have a straight arm. Otherwise, you'll be prevented from playing because it'll be effectively what they would call chucking, and you have a maximum of 15 degrees. I'm pretty sure.
Or is that an actual rule?
It's a rule
in cricket. Got it.
It's a rule.
Wow.
It's a rule.
Wow.
Okay. So they'll have a run up. The back foot plant and the front foot plant is very similar to how you would get the end rotation of a pitching a ball. They're using that braking forces. If that's how that particular pitcher uses it, it's definitely something that cricketers do. And they're bowling up anything from 85 to 95 miles an hour. But they're bowling down into the dirt to get the ball to move. The seams are different to a baseball. It's a round seam around the ball. So what you do is you try and keep one side of the ball shiny, one side of the ball scuffed up, so that the aerodynamics cause the ball to move in a different way depending on which side you're presenting. So if you're presenting the shiny side, one way and you get roughed upside, then the smoother airflow on this side will get the ball to move in a different direction. So,
oh wow, that's fascinating.
So just in the same way a pitcher will try and hide his pitch in the glove, and try and if you've got guys behind you trying to pick up what's going on, they'll try and hide where they've got the seam position or where they've got the fingers. So it's similar. You can manipulate the ball in similar ways, and there's synchronicity in some of the terms. So a slider in cricket is the same as a slider in baseball. It's just delivered in a slightly different way. But
what are some of the other bowls that they would, like, I would call it a pitch, right? So a slider, a curveball.
Yeah, so you've got change up. You would have something called a Yorker, which is aiming direct. It's like 6 inches or so in front of the stumps. You're aiming to catch it right at the front. So it's very difficult for the batsman to defend. You've got bouncers where you're trying to bounce it over. The one thing with cricket that you can do is you can hit the batsman.
Got it.
You can bounce it up into the ribs and so if it gets the ribs but actually they miss it and it catches their hand with the bat and it pops up in the air and somebody catches it, they're out because the hands are an extension of the bat.
Wow.
So
wow.
You may want to pepper somebody and just soften them up for something else that's coming.
Is it like in baseball where they'll throw at somebody? If you throw at me, I'll throw at you, kind of thing? Do they play that?
No, you don't tend to get too much. Occasionally, the bowlers who don't bat, they may get some. There's lots of chirping. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Yeah. That would be a great great podcast. Comparisons of cricket chirping to it'd have to be a late night one, I think.
we won't tell the kids about that one.
Yeah, so from a rotational perspective, I approach it, and a lot of the key movements are very similar. So the hinge, the deceleration forces, controlling all of that stuff, maximizing ground force development up through the kinetic change. So using all those fascial links, thinking about spiral lines, thinking about the oblique chains, making use of those and training those so that we minimize injury so that they can practice harder, hit harder, throw harder, whilst at the same time developing their ability to do it for longer.
Yeah. When it comes to rotational training, what are your main things? What are the things we need to get down?
Number one, torso stability. If we can't control between the diaphragm and the knees, and that's everything, the pelvic, hip, lumbar complex, that's down to the obliques, that's down to the deep transverse abdominis muscles, that's down to our glutes, in particular our glutes. If we haven't got that level of control to stabilize, then we're just a weak chain. And we're like the proverbial bucket. We've got holes everywhere, leaking energy everywhere. So that would be my first thing. Secondly, it would be starting with the feet. Once we've got the torso stability to think about, then I'm thinking about the feet. Have we got problems at the feet where we have a pronation issue? Do we have a lack of dorsiflexion in the feet that's impacting our ability to control what our feet are doing? So that we're not the theme, not losing energy. We're maximizing the amount of energy up the battery. So when we get to either a bat in a hand or a ball in a hand, that we've got as much energy saved to release that ball with the intent that we want to throw it with or hit with. Then linking into thoracic, scapular, shoulder, I kind of link them both together. This is my curveball. Vestibular system. I've got to give huge props to Lee Taft for this. This is where I first came across this in a sports context, and he uses it in I think it's mainly his tennis, but also his basketball training, where he does called 180s. So you're running forwards, you get a command. There's a tight turn, so you're going forwards straight into a back pedal. You're doing it both sides. You're doing it as efficiently as you can. So you're trying to turn tight like a tornado, but you're trying to make sure that your vestibular system is working effectively so that you can see all around you. So we do it forwards, backwards. We get them to players to identify which side's the weakest side. We then do several more reps on the weaker side because we want to improve it. And I've had players going, I'm not sure why we're doing this, and I've gone, okay, we're gonna have opportunities to see why we're doing it, but I'm not going to explain it now. I want you to go through what we're going to do, and then we'll talk about it. So in situations where we've got a team preparing for a tournament, and as classic as pitchers do, they don't like doing them, but they have to do them as PFPs. Yeah, pitchers hate PFPs. Like that. They just don't like it. They don't want to be the one messing up in front of the rest of the bullpen, nor the coaches, because the coaches are just going to get on your back and give you a hard time. So we've had a PFP session, and halfway through it, I've got the permission of the coach. Can I just have a word? Okay, guys, the 180s. Who's struggling on the side that they were found the weakest? All these hands go up.
Yep.
Mic drop. Get buy-in.
It's a good moment right there.
Yeah, exactly. You get buy-in. You get the buy-in because they're suddenly connected. Oh, that's why we're doing that.
Yep.
And then your next warm-up or the next session, you get, Coach, can we do more of those? Or can I go and do what do I need to do to get best at this? And that's not everybody, but that's the guys that want to get better.
Yeah.
And as soon as you get that point, happy days. Because vestibular system's so important in rotational movement. Even something that's not quite as active as a forward run to 180, but you're still trying to control your body. And if you're 1 or 2 degrees off and you're more dominant one side than you are the other, that's going to have a big impact. So for me, learn it, and don't get me wrong. I don't have a PhD in vestibular training. I'm constantly looking to learn how to develop my understanding of this and ways in which I can utilize it. It's not something that becomes your full toolbox. It's just another special ingredient the chef's found from his trip up the Andes. It's just something that helps you just take that 1 or 2 steps more just to help to piece it all together. Because we probably know so little of what our potential is because we haven't got the science or the background or the understanding to tap into it. And I think this is the next phase of sports development.
I agree. It was 2019, and I was live with Lee Taft, and we were doing those runs, exactly what you were saying there. And it was the first time I'd ever done something like that, thinking about what I was trying. You know what I mean? I've done it on the field, I've done it in practice, but never really paying attention to how it felt. Was it efficient? Do I feel slow here? All those little things, those matter in sports. Those matter big time. If you're a step off somebody, you come in the wrong direction, you have to make up ground now, you're already beat. And so with those moments, even thinking about an outfielder, a shortstop, if you have a ball hit over your head, you have to turn and go. And if the sky is shaking because you don't have that ability to control your body, the torso, everything while you're doing this, you might miss the ball. And so that's where, you start really seeing these things kind of develop. And it's tough, like you said, to get the buy-in, but that's exactly, love hearing that story about the guy seeing it on the field because that's where it matters. And I think in those moments, the athletes go oh, coach has got my back. Got it. Okay. I know he's doing some weird things. I know he's doing some things that are I have no idea what I'm doing this for, but he's got my back.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love
that. And that, when you get that moment, and you may only get a few of those every few months. Even if you're lucky, it might be once or twice a year you get that. But it fills your bucket.
100%.
Your gratitude 100%. Bucket then just this is why I do it.
Yep. It's, Justin Kavanaugh.
Mm-hmm.
He said something to us one time that he's like, coaching it's selfish. I'm in this for the fulfillment. And I think we'd be naive to not think that as coaches or to appreciate it because it's the reason we do this. It's the reason we are doing this. Yes, we want to get kids faster. Yes, we want to get athletes stronger and perform better. We want to help people. That's the be all end all right there. So that's amazing. Wow, Alan, this has been amazing. I loved all the conversation, like everything we had talked about, everything we've discussed. I love the philosophy. I love the analogies that you brought in, and just the years of experience of coaching and being able to break it down. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I'll put all your information on the show notes, but if somebody wanted to reach out to you, they wanted to follow you, ask you some follow-up questions, or maybe they're in Britain and they would like to work with you, how can they reach out to you?
Well, first of all, yeah, thank you for having me on. It's been an honor and a privilege to be able to speak on your podcast. I've been listening to your other work, and you do a great job. So I'm very honoured and privileged, especially with the guest list that you've had on. I really appreciate it. Usually, Instagram is the place where you'll be able to contact. I don't post a huge amount. I don't find, to be honest, I don't find the time to be able to create it all. There's probably
It's
a little
tough.
bit of concern about what I'm putting out there as far as it good enough, all that kind of imposter syndrome stuff, but which even at my age you still get.
I'll put it all in the notes. I will do that. But also I understand the imposter syndrome stuff. It's this is the stuff I was talking about earlier. It's a weird thing that we get caught up in that. Yet when people see us do our thing, they're like, how'd you get so smart at this? How'd you do this?
Yeah.
And it's information. The thing that I constantly tell myself is you're hurting someone by not putting it out more than you are.
That's a good way.
Because you want to help people, right? And I think if you can come back to that at all times, it makes it so much easier. You're like, I'm not an imposter. The world's telling me I'm an imposter sometimes, but I'm not.
I think the problem with Instagram is that there are a lot of imposters on there.
Oh yeah, that's all right though. And this is another reason why we need to come out and fight the good fight, right?
Yeah.
Spread the good message.
I appreciate it, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Alan. We'll talk soon, man. Appreciate you.
Thank you.